Welcome to the Echoes of Alchemy with Lotus Sound podcast. My name is Jay Robinson, and I'm coming to you from Lotus Sound Studio in beautiful downtown Collingwood, Ontario, Canada, where we provide sound baths, sound training, Kirtan, wellness day retreats, and more. We're looking forward to our 6th year this summer of Singing Bowls in the Park at Awen Gathering Place in Collingwood. And we have a few spots left for our next 3-day sound immersion training coming up May 24th, 25th, and 26th. So if you're interested in becoming a certified sound bath artist, head over to our website, lotussound.ca, and join us in May. As grounded, passionate, and dedicated students of ancient and modern sound practices, our team at Lotus Sound supports those looking to amplify their intuition, inner power, and purpose with our one-of-a-kind unplugged gatherings and sound bath artistry training. Our mission is to inspire a holistically infused lifestyle utilizing natural, highly effective, and accessible sound wellness practices to contribute to the health, happiness, and spirit of our community. On our podcast, we will talk all things sound, from frequencies to deep dives on instruments and philosophy. We'll share our inspiration and interesting stories along the way. I hope you'll enjoy this podcast. Be sure to rate and like. And we welcome you to become your most authentic, grounded, and loving self by embracing the practice of sound with us. Enjoy today's episode. My name's Jay Robinson, and my partner Justine and I own a business called Lotus Sound in Collingwood, Ontario. And we offer sound baths and Kirtan and voice yoga and yoga nidra. Yeah, we recently, last weekend actually, had our first 3-day sound training immersion that we put on. And we're calling it a deep dive into sound bath artistry. So it was 3 days, and we had 12 students with us. And everybody had a gong, everybody had a singing bowl, everybody had a little station. And beautiful weekend. We went into all kinds of different components of sound baths and theory, philosophy, music theory, percussion, all kinds of stuff. And it was really, really beautiful. And a number of occasions, we had Q&A portions and lots of awesome questions. We had just really inquisitive students. And one of our students, Colleen, asked a question about the history of instruments. So we were discussing prior to a break at the training. We were talking about Himalayan singing bowls, and for anyone who doesn't know what a Himalayan singing bowl is, they're the brass kind of colored meditation bowls that you might see, and they sound really beautiful. I'll ring one here. Yeah, so they make this really beautiful meditative tone. You can sing them as well if you use the activator and just kind of circle the edge of the rim. A really gentle way you can get them to sing, like I just did here. So yeah, they call them singing bowls. And Himalayan singing bowls are really interesting because when it comes to the history, nobody really actually knows where these came from or what their original intended use actually was, because they're still unearthing some of these. Like, obviously they're making a lot of them now, so there's machined ones, and there's a big trade in sound healing instruments, obviously. So there's a lot being manufactured, but some are still being found, and they can be very, very old. Like Justine's set that she uses, she's got a set of 7 that are in the planetary frequency kind of realm, but they're all old. They're all antique. Some of them are 80 or 90 years old, and it's really, really beautiful. But nobody really knows, like, what were these used for 250, 300, 400 years ago. Like, one of the main theories is that they were gifts as well. So it would have been a gift you would get maybe if you were getting married, something like that. So Colleen asked, she's like, okay, I play guitar. I'm wondering, like, how does it relate to these other instruments? Like, where did these other instruments come from? And I just loved that question because I have a little bit of insight. And I'm fascinated by it and inspired by the history of instruments and the way that they're put together and all of these types of things. And just a bit of a backstory. So in 2006, I'm a guitar player. I have been all my life since I was a teenager. It was my main instrument. My dad had a guitar that was always there. So that was it was available to me, and definitely has been a huge part of my life and my journey musically, and in lots of different ways. But in 2006, I went to Bowser, British Columbia, which is like literally, I think, an intersection, but it's on Vancouver Island, and really, really beautiful, beautiful area. Oh my goodness, the ocean, everything, Bowser. So yeah, it was like a single grocery store, a coffee shop, a bar, that kind of thing. And I went there. I stayed with a friend that I met at a mutual friend's wedding, Adam Johnston. He was a luthier who studied and is a guitar maker. So that's what he does for a living, is make guitars. And so I went to stay with him, and I stayed 7 or 8 weeks in 2006, the whole summer, essentially. And we designed and built a guitar for me from scratch. Basically, he built one. He was like one step ahead on his, and then I followed with mine. So he helped me with mine, but we, from the initial concept design all the way to the finished product, took all that time, and it was so amazing. So I have a lot of insight into, a decent amount, above average amount of insight into how acoustic guitars work. And I'm really grateful for that experience. I still have the guitar, and it's literally magic for me. I love it. So yeah, there's that. And then in 2000, I also taught guitar for a long time. And then in 2009 or 2010, I think it was 2009, Justine and I opened a guitar shop in Collingwood called JR Guitars. It's on Simcoe Street. For anybody who's local to the area, it's where Press Juice is now. And that was our guitar shop, which is actually like feet from the studio that we're in now, Lotus Sound. I love small town life. And so we did consignment guitars. We did a lot of used guitars and did a lot of repairs because I'd had that experience with the luthier work. So I learned a lot about instruments and a lot about the individual personalities of each instrument too, which is really cool. And the relationship between like player and instrument is really fascinating too. So yeah, there's that. And then we closed that shop. It was a bit much for just me to do, and went on to other things, but I ended up managing Joe's Music, which is a music store in Collingwood. Joe Connolly, worked with him for a few years, and that was just amazing. So his store was a lot of eclectic instruments and people coming in with all kinds of interesting old stuff. And it was so cool. Really, really grateful for that experience. I also managed Blue Mount Music in Collingwood after that. So I did a lot of restrings and a lot of work with, that was newer instruments, and helping people find the instruments that fit their needs. So I have a lot of insight into instruments and where they fit in our lives and all of these types of things. And so many interesting customers come in, and through a retail shop, anybody that works retail can understand this. So one of the customers that came through years ago too, and it was Blue Mount Music, came in, and he said to me, he used to tell me all kinds of really far out stuff, but sometimes he'd have these like little bits of wisdom, and like shiny wisdom that I was like, ooh. And one of these bits of shiny wisdom was that he said, do you know where all these came from? And I was like, what are you talking about? I looked up, he's pointing at a wall of guitars. Like, do you know where all these came from? Like, they came from all over the place. You know, there's some of them from the US, some are from China, some are from Canada. And he's like, no, like originally, do you know like what these originally started out as, like the guitar itself? I'm like, I don't. He's like, they're weapons. These are all weapons. And then he left. And I was like, oh my goodness. He might be right. Like, what is he talking about? So I looked into it a bit, and the more I thought about it too, it's like, sure, maybe. So let's look back at some instruments here, and let's see where they came from. Let's go a little deeper with Colleen's question from the 3-day training today with this little podcast, and talk about just a few instruments that come to mind when this theory of them coming from weapons. Let's see if there's validity. Let's see what you think. And so I think for me, thinking back to, okay, the guitar came from weapons. Sure, where did it come from? Obviously, it came from a bow. So it would make sense to me that, and I have to imagine, I'm not a hunter, but I have to imagine that if you're hunting, there's a lot of downtime. Patience is probably your best friend, and you're waiting. And if you're waiting with something like a bow, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before you start plunking on it. And yeah, next thing you know, fast forward thousands of years later, and the globe is completely like saturated with all these different forms of musical bows. And I love that kind of idea. I also love the idea that that these tools of partial destruction, war tools, obviously hunting's a thing that, we need it. It's survival. But when we come to instruments of war, which the bow can definitely be, to transmute, to have the spirit, the human spirit and the spirit of music transmute this tool or this instrument of destruction into this instrument of emotion and spirit and love and community is just, I love it so much. Like, it just adds so much to the concept of these instruments as being, inanimate objects or something. They're literally, they have spirits of their own. And I can attest to that because I have a really cool story because of my experience with so many people's guitars. The odd time someone would bring in something that is like truly a magical instrument, and some of them just have like a potent energy about them. And one in particular that I can think of is Blue Mountain Music. A customer brought in a 1957 Fender Stratocaster, which is like, if anybody knows guitars, even if you don't know guitars, you probably know what a Fender Stratocaster is. But there's these magical years, like in the 50s, especially the late 50s with like some of the Gibson stuff, where there is like a intense mojo to these instruments. And I can attest to it with this 57 Strat that I got to try. The lady brought it in just to like make sure it still worked, and then it was like back to the vault with it. And just holding it and playing it, it was amazing. It was like weightless. Like, it literally was like negative weight. Like, I think I got lighter by holding it, like that type of feeling. And you just like, oh my goodness, the stories and the mojo in some of these instruments is real, and it's quantifiable for sure. So yeah, the instruments have their mojo. And if we look back at them in this way, like, okay, maybe the guitar was a bow to begin with, but where did it come from? So it didn't just go from bow to, 6-string Gibson Les Paul. Like, that's not a thing. There's thousands of years. And there's a few instruments that jump out at me as being like direct examples of this type of idea. One of them is the berimbau. And the berimbau is a Brazilian instrument, byproduct of Africa. But the berimbau literally from a distance looks like a bow. Like, it's a bow and it's got a gourd attached to it. And I had the pleasure of playing, or trying to play, because it's really hard. Trying to play a berimbau, I think it was 2017 at a camp in upstate New York, Rhythm, Sound, and Magic with Billy Martin, Ciro Baptista, and a few other amazing percussionists that I got to be there with. Really blessed for that. But I got to try the berimbau, and it was incredibly hard. And all you're really doing is holding it, and you're playing the string with a rock in a really specific way. And it was like incredibly hard. It was probably the hardest instrument I've tried. And you also hold an instrument called a kashishi, which is a little shaker. And actually, I've got one here, kashishi. And it's made of vines. Yeah, really beautiful sound. So you hold the kashishi in one hand, and then you play the berimbau with the other hand. And if you look up a berimbau, you're going to see, basically, you'll see a bow. It's literally what it is. And it's tied to capoeira, which is this like dance style martial arts from Brazil that's really fascinating. It has a really rich and deep and extremely potent cultural story too. So you could check that out too, capoeira. And so berimbau is a really good example. Another example, and I see this one every day because we have one at the house, is the ektara. And the ektara is like a 2-string, or sometimes it can be a dutara, a 2 or 1-string instrument, big gourd. You can kind of think of like a sitar type vibe, but with single or 2 strings, no frets, and you just strum the strings and you would sing to it. And the ektaras kind of started out as an instrument for minstrels, or like wandering sadhus who were going from village to village, telling stories or singing songs. A lot of chanting is done with the ektara. Anybody who's familiar with Krishna Das, his original instrument was ektara or dutara. Wasn't the harmonium. So he was chanting a lot in India with this single string or double stringed instrument. And I've got one here, so I'll let you hear what it sounds like. So this is a vocal accompaniment instrument essentially. And I mean, obviously the human voice is the original instrument, and we've all got it. We all got access to it, but having an instrument to sing to, especially when there's more than one person involved, is extremely beneficial and extremely potent. So yeah, here's the ektara. So you just strum it. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. And yeah, so really simple and really trancy. Like you can really, if you sit with it and just spend some time with it, the simplicity of it is what allows it to get really deep too. Like obviously with musical instruments, we can go as deep as we want and we can get really technical, but these really simple instruments allow us, especially when we're singing to them, to really go pretty deep. So yeah, that's the ektara or the dutar. So that's from India. And another example, and might as well stick with India, is the tampura. So the tampura, everybody has probably seen, whether you know it or not, you've probably seen the tampura. The tampura is a gourd instrument. It looks kind of like a sitar, again, kind of a sitar-y vibe. And any Indian classical performance that you see, or that you see footage of, especially prior to, the last 20 years, there would always be a tampura player. So the tampura creates a droney foundation for the instrumentalist or the singer to sing over top of. So it's a drone of a single key, essentially. And yeah, tampura is really beautiful. There's electronic tampuras, which are really common now. So I use one. I use the iTabla Pro, I think it is, app. It's got a really beautiful and versatile tampura. If you want to sing to it, it's a lot easier than busting out the real thing and tuning it, which I do have here. So I'll let you hear it. So the electronic one, iTabla Pro. You can also buy machines that are tempura machines to sing to as well. So yeah, let's look at the tempura. And the tempura comes in different shapes and sizes as well. There's male and female, because this is more based on, or not more, this is definitely based on vocal. So vocal range, and the male vocal range and the female vocal range are obviously different for most folks. So there's different types of instruments to suit these ranges. And so here's the tempura. So yeah, really meditative tone. The tempura is heavily meditative, which I really love. So yeah, it was used mostly, did some research prior to jumping on for this podcast, and a little bit, not too much history on it in this sense of what the topic is here, of where it came from, because it's an evolution of so many other instruments. And I mean, that goes for everything, including guitar, anything in the Western kind of sphere. Everything is always evolving all the time. But the tempura's shift from what was a ceremonial instrument to a more meditative or a creative instrument actually signified a pretty significant cultural shift and change at the time. So these instruments, as they evolve from bow to berimbau type instrument, to more strings, to bigger, more elaborate bodies and more different timbres, they also reflect the society that they're a part of, which is really cool and fascinating. So yeah, that's tempura. And of course, the instrument that was also a big discussion at our 3-day training last weekend, the sound training, was gong, because we all had gongs. So there's 13 gongs, and we did a number of different sound bath kind of journeys together. And so gong is another one. Where did the gong come from? And the gong's really interesting because, in a sense, it hasn't likely changed a whole lot in probably thousands of years. Like, the concept is the same, right? The song remains the same. It's a gong. But we've had a lot of revolutionary kind of technological advances in the last 30, 40 years that allow us to make gongs in a really specific, intentional way, like planetary and all of these tuned gongs. But the gong itself stems back to at least 3,500 BC. Like, we're going way back. Gongs have been used in ceremonial circumstances, as well as in war type scenarios for as communication, really. I mean, gong is about communication. It's really what the instrument is about. and it still communicates a pretty significant message when we hear it in all of the contexts and all of the ways that gongs are used these days. It's pretty amazing. But it would have been used for ceremony as well as, letting, you can maybe let the village know that there's impending issues arising, something pretty serious is happening or about to happen. Communication. And definitely nowadays, meditation is pretty big with it. And that would stem back from the evolution of the gong through the Kundalini yoga movement, right, in the 60s, which brought the gong kind of to the Western, to our Western consciousness. And it's just gone from there. So gong is really, really potent, also super, super ancient. China to Java, Bali, Western cultures. It's been used to announce the arrival of officials, in some places, but definitely a religious ceremony and for communication, right? We're communicating with the gong, and just love that so much. 3500 BCE, Southeast Asia. Really, really neat. So gong. And then the other one, of course, to talk to before we wrap up here is guitar. I mean, if you're listening to this, you probably have, I almost guarantee you that you have some kind of idea of guitar or what it is, whether you've played one or somebody's played one in your presence or, whatever it might be. So we all have our society has a pretty deep connection to guitar, but not so much with where it came from, really. I mean, it's the most current and most accessible means of expression probably for music, or it has been for a bit. I mean, I'm sure it'll change in time, but it's really been quite potent for Western society. And guitar stems back to at least 2000 BC in Egypt, and to a family of instruments called lyres. And there was a number of different examples that would have been used in ancient times, and these are really only known through, to my knowledge, and I mean, what I know is very limited, but to my knowledge, only known through, likely through art that's been passed along or that we can still access. But it would have evolved into the Greek instrument, what's it called? The Kathara lyre. And the Moorish oud, and oud is O-U-D. It's a really, really beautiful instrument. So that would be like a further evolution of this ancient Egyptian instrument family. And the oud's really cool. I've got an oud. I've never been able to play it. I have the habit of, or had a habit of acquiring really interesting instruments and then having this idea to play them. And I've realized in my older age here that that's not really how it works. You got to pick one or two and roll with it. This lifetime requires, some of these instruments require a whole lifetime or more. And oud is definitely one of them. But if you listen to some of the oud players, it's really cool because there's no frets on the oud. So they play these in-between notes called microtones, which to the Western ear can be really disjarring and dissonant, but really emotive. So it's really cool. So you should listen to somebody play with some oud. And the Moorish oud, 8th century. And then medieval Spain, the guitarra morisca, and the guitarra latina are two different branches of the current modern guitar that we know, that were both kind of evolving and happening at the same time, which is neat because numerous cultures are connecting to create a new instrument, which is what's been happening the whole time. Right, these spans of time are just so long that we don't see them happening in such a really quick and linear way. And then the guitar that we know of today, right? Spain. We're talking Spain, and we're definitely pointing our finger at Antonio de Torres. Antonio de Torres in the mid 1800s. Literally designed the guitar that we know today. So if you know of a classical guitar, a nylon string guitar, it remains essentially unchanged from his design. I mean, there's a little bit of tweaks here and there, definitely different woods. But Antonio de Torres is the father of the modern guitar. And everything's evolved from there. Guitars also used to be a lot smaller. The guitar we know today is actually gigantic compared to the guitars of the 1800s. So when Antonio de Torres invented the design that we know today, it was revolutionary because it was huge, massive. And today guitars are way, way, way bigger. And we like to go all the way. We like to go all the way with instruments. So yeah, this is a really, really cool topic. And just the history of instruments, where they come from, how does it tie in with the human evolution and the human experience? And my interest in just the way that these tools of survival and of destruction or of war were transmuted by the human spirit and the spirit of music itself into these emotive tools, each instrument is literally a living being, in my opinion, and they should be treated as such. So make sure if you've got an instrument sitting around that you're at least speaking nicely to it from time to time, definitely tuning it and sending your heartfelt intent to it, at least, if not practicing. And I just love that journey, and it's not over yet, because all of this is evolving. And when it comes to sound bath artistry, it's really cool because a lot of the instruments are literally new to what's happening, and the way they're being used for sound therapy, sound bath artistry, sound healing is just awesome. So I look forward to learning more as we go along here. And so if you want to do the sound training, we've got another 3-day sound immersion training, deep dive into sound bath artistry, coming up May 24th, 25th, and 26th. We've only got a small handful. I think there's 5 spots, something like that. But you can register on our site, lotussound.ca. Come and let's deep dive. We go into all of it, and you leave a confident sound bath artist. Check it out on the site, definitely, lotussound.ca/sound training. And you can see all of its, we actually put up a few clips too from the last session, so you can see what we're up to. And really fun, really informative, lots of value. And we're really, really passionate about it, Justine and I, about sharing this knowledge and skill set with our community and with like-minded folks like you. And appreciate you listening to this. And thanks so much. Have an awesome day. Go play some music and enjoy. See you soon. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode and that you'll join us again. Visit our website, lotussound.ca, and if you're ever in the Collingwood, Ontario, Canada neighborhood, be sure to look us up and connect. We'd love to meet you, love to vibe with you. Thanks for listening.